Hello everyone, I'm Joanne and welcome to Pastels with Joanne. Today we're going to continue on with the portrait part of our painting. So we're going to work on a little bit on her face. I've got a kind of a blown up image of her face to take a look at as a reference today. So I'm going to take some of our pencils and we're going to dive right into getting some more fine tuning happening here on the face. So I'm just going to start by adjusting the nose and eye area. Now that we have a close-up image here to work with, we can see a lot more of the details. And so I'm just going to start pulling in. I need to narrow in the nose area here. So this is going to look quite dark when I first put it on, but it's just going to create a little bit of a shadow on the other side of the nose. So you just kind of touch that in with a darker color and then come back in with my skin tone shade and soften it up. And the reason I do that instead of going straight into a medium tone is just because it makes it easier to just kind of come in and fine tune darks and lights when you have a darker base that has been lightened up with something else, just because the layer is sitting underneath. And having those layers of chalk gives you a little bit more control over what's happening in a small area. So I'm just going to also take my blending stick. It's got a little rubber tipped end, and that just helps me to kind of blend things out in an area that's really, really small, too small for my finger. So that just kind of gets the nose shape in there a little bit better. She does have a fairly strong highlight along the tip of the nose, which I'm going to fill in now. I'm going to take a chunk and I'm going to kind of tap that in. So this chunk has a really crisp edge to it, so it's allowing me to get in a tiny area that may not otherwise be able to fit, and then come back in with my pencil to kind of blend it out in areas where I don't want it. And I'm going to take a medium tone. I'm going to kind of come in there and add in some of the shadowing on this side of the nose. So this is the non-highlight side of the face. And because the light source is fairly strong, she does have a fairly strong shadow versus highlight section on the nose. So I'm just going to get that one side in there. And sort of just tapping it in. I'm touching very, very lightly with the pencil, just because I don't want it to pick up too much. These are really, really soft changes that we're making because it's in such a soft area, or such a small area. So I'm going to use the blending tool again, just to soften the amount of color that I put in there. And this is going to require layering of more than one color of chalk. And what that does is that creates depth. Because as you move around the face isn't uniform in all just one shade. There's all kinds of lights and shadows and different colors that are being picked up, reflecting onto the skin. So you want to make sure that you add more than one color into your skin tone when you're creating a portrait. And just re-emphasized where the nostril area is, creating a highlight and then a shadow along the side of the nostril and underneath the nose as well. To come in a little bit more with a highlight along the tip. So this is a very, very small area to work in for a portrait. So if you're new to pastels, wanting to try this, I would highly recommend, if you're wanting to try portrait, to do it on a bigger scale than this. This is a very, very small area to work in, so details you have to get very, very specific with detail in there. I'm just going to add a little bit more into the lips. So I'm just adding a pink color and building up the lips a little bit fuller. and back in with some Skin Tone as the highlight shade. And so there's some really strong changes in color inside the lip area itself. And that just really helps to define the lips. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually take my rubber tipped blender, and I'm going to take one of my darker shades. This is kind of a burgundy shade, and I'm just going to get a little bit of pastel on the tip of this blending tool so that I can get in here with a really, really fine mark, just of some dark along the edge where the top and the bottom lip meet up. And it just kind of defines the lip. And I'm also going to use that to kind of blend upwards to create that really specific shape that's happening with the lips. And just touch a little bit of that into the bottom area as well, leaving that highlight area behind so that it's still nice and light. I'm going to put in a little bit of highlight along the edge of the face, as this is our area that's really lit up by the sun. So I'm going to make sure that whole side of the face has a nice strong highlight. Blending the highlight out with my Skin Tone pencil. I'm going to add a few shapes into the neck again now. So with the neck area, I just want to add a little bit more of a warmer color in here. She's very warm. And just in those shadow areas. And now that we have a really close-up image to work with here, I'm going to put in some of the really fine details inside the neck. So what we see happening here is a really specific crease with a highlight where the turn of the head is happening. So I'm just going to put the highlight area in there. And I'm going to come in with my darker burgundy, and I'm going to put in it's a very specific crease that's created by the turn of the head in the neck area. Now I place that in, it's really dark, but it's not as thick as I put it. So I'm going to use my blending tool to push the pastel that's sitting beside it up against it to help soften that line so it's not so thick. And that's how the highlight ends up, or the crease ends up showing. There's a little bit of highlight and kind of a reflective light that's happening inside there as well. So I'm just going to touch that in. And then just blend out the rest of that shape. I'm just going to soften these darks that I placed in here with the blending stump. And I have also a fairly strong highlight that's happening right in here. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to start with just the Skin Tone pencil and see if I can get it as light as I need it to be. Starts, if you see where the line goes, it starts on the outer edge of the neck and then comes inwards. So you want to make sure you get that placed in there properly. And then this is all in highlight right in here. Just going to come back in and add the shadow back in just by moving some of these darks around with the blending stump. Soften this edge, and all of these darks kind of are nice and soft in here. There's no creases or anything like that, so you want to make sure you soften out that. Okay. I'm going to spend a little bit of time moving down into the arm today. So I really want to kind of work in some of that warmth in the skin tone. So when we see the way the light is hitting her shoulder and the inside of her arm, we know that we're going to need to get darker on this side and a lot lighter on the outer edge. So I'm going to start just by kind of putting in this sort of strip of color that we see happening right in here. So it starts kind of in the middle of the shoulder area right in here. And I'm just applying this literally by just kind of like coloring. I'm just rubbing it on there. It's not going to stay looking like this, but I'm just applying the color in that area to start off with. Kind of the same way you would if you were using a chunk. So with a pencil you have to push a little bit harder if you really want the color to pick up. And then we'll do the blending after. So I'll just start it off by putting that in there. Now I want to get a little bit more of this color up into the shoulder again, or pardon me, yeah, in the shoulder and up and closer to the neck area, just so that I did put this in here, but it's not showing as much, and we want the colors to match up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my skin tone color and I'm going to soften that by just blending on both sides and kind of right over top the whole thing. So when I was working with the darker shade, I was pushing hard with the pencil to make it pick up. And now I'm using this lighter pencil and I'm wanting to blend it out so that it's soft. You can see how it's softening it. And I'm pushing a lot lighter with my pencil now because I'm not necessarily wanting the light to pick up, as it'll pick up a little bit, which is what I want, but I also am using it just to kind of blend that darker color into that light that was already on the arm. There was a chunk of light that we put in there last time. And so that's just blending right over top, especially over top of where the light and dark meet up. So where that edge is, we're going to help kind of remove the line. I'm going to go in with my finger. Anywhere where I can fit my finger in for blending, it just does really a nice job of blending colors together and creating softness. Okay, so now we're going to work on getting some of the darks happening in on the underside of the arm. So right in here, I'm going to get that dark in there. I'm going to use more than one color in here and really get that nice and dark. And just a smidge of it where it meets up with the dress. And then we're going to kind of pull in some of these darker shades now onto the inside of the arm that's in shadow. So again, because this color is darker, I'm not having to push as hard. So it's really just kind of depends on which pencil you're using. Some of them are a little bit softer, so they pick up easier. Others are not as hard, so you have to push a little harder to get the color to pick up. It just depends on the pencil, and because this is a darker shade, it picks up darker. I'm gonna blend that in. Now we need to put in that elbow kind of dimple right in here. And so I just want to make sure that my placement of that is correct. And so if I kind of am matching up my angle, it's kind of at an angle meeting up with where the dress is meeting up with where the dress kind of crease is. So if I keep that angle in there, it's going to be right about here. And so now that I have the placement, I'm just going to sort of place in that subtle, dark little shadowed area that's happening there. And I'm also going to adjust the outer shape of the arm at that point to create the look of that elbow, which seems to be missing right now. So we're going to take my darker color, follow, so it kind of comes inwards, and then we just get a subtle outward section to the arm, and then it comes back in again. And so I'm just kind of trimming the inside of the arm with those marks. So what I'm going to need to do now is I'm going to need to come in with my background and fix that up so that I know what is the actual outer edge of my arm. So coming in with background color helps crispen that up, and I want to come in a little narrower right in here. So I'm just covering up some of those dark marks to give myself a better shape to the outer edge of the arm. And so now I need to soften these lines. I'm going to use my skin tone pencil and really soften these edges that I've created. I want to avoid anything looking outlined. That is kind of the trick of realism is replacing lines with form by filling in lights and shadows is basically what we're doing. And when we transfer an image onto this to get started from the sketch, basically that's what it is. It's an outline drawing. And so we need to fill in everything in between all of the lines and then make sure all the lines disappear so that it doesn't look outlined any longer. That's the goal. So, softening those edges until they disappear into the edge of the arm. And then when I come back in and work on the background and all the areas that are happening in behind, that will also help to remove the last little bit of suggestion of any outline that might be happening where the background meets up with the arm or any other part that you might be working on. So it just kind of softens that. And again, I want to come back in and I just want to blend this out to soften those shapes that I put in there. Okay, and so on the inside of the arm here, I've come too wide, right in here. And so I'm going to need to kind of trim that up as well. And so the way I'm going to do that is, again, by using the, well, it's not the background color, it's actually the color of the dress that's going to be put back in there. And so I'm just going to use, this is the same color that I put in as a base in this dress area. And I'm going to put that in there and I'm going to use that to thin up this section of arm. It's also the same color that I have in the background. So it works well for that until I have everything placed in properly. Just adding some highlight back in here. She's got a soft highlight on the shoulder. I want to make sure that gets put in there. And not at this point, because we have enough pastel on here, the skin tone color isn't picking up as light as I'd like it. So I'm going to use my light chunk and get a nice highlight put in there. So it'll go on brighter than I want. But then I can use my skin tone color to soften. And then just sort of touch it just a little bit with the finger, and that just softens everything. A little bit of highlight in here that I want to brighten up as well, kind of on the inside of the elbow shape. So this is also going to be brighter than I want. Just come back in with my skin tone, blend that out. Okay, so we're going to move down to the hand area. Hands can be a real challenge, so you do want to really pay attention to all of the shapes and dimension that you see happening inside the shape of a hand. So to start off with a hand, I always make sure I draw it as a mitt, meaning that I don't draw any individual fingers at first, and just treat the whole thing as one shape so that I can get kind of an accurate size. Because we tend to, for some reason, want to make fingers longer than they actually are, often in the photo. And the reason for that is we know that the fingers are long, but they're often bent, so we're not seeing the length, but we know it's there, so we tend to want to place it in. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of drawing the mitt shape that I see, just to make sure I have the right spacing. And once I have that in there, and feel like that's accurate for size, then I can come back in and add in all of the individual fingers. So now that I've got that placed in there, I feel like that's fairly accurate. I'm going to take my dark color and I'm going to put in just some of the dark creases that I see happening inside there. So the first one is going to be kind of alongside the hand where the thumb is. The thumb is sort of sitting sideways the way the hand is positioned up against the dress. So what I'm doing is I'm just paying attention to what this direction is of this line that's created by that crease. And so it kind of scoops inwards, outwards again, and just right down right to where the finger ends. And the other thing that I'll do in a moment is I'm going to use my greens for the dress to help trim out the outside edge of the hand. So I'm going to put in the next one, that index finger placement. And this is where the angle and size and shape of what we actually see here is really important in terms of making it look like a hand when it's finished. So I'm just kind of getting these lines sort of marked in. And there's one last one that's showing. And then the knuckles kind of cut off. So this is kind of just general placement that I have now. And so I'm going to put down these pencils. I'm going to come back in with some of my dress color. So this is a little bit bluer than what the actual dress color is, but this is going to be my base. I'm going to be blending this color with a really light green to create the minty shade that we have in that dress. So the entire base of the skirt is going to be this color. So I'm going to come along with this color and I'm going to use it to place in the outer edge of my hand. And that helps me kind of trim things up that I don't want. So if I come too far with my finger shapes, I can come back in with the blue and cover it up. So I'm just going to come about that close right now. And I'll be adding more layers of this in after. But it just helps us to kind of pay attention to the placement of the fingers for now. Having that background area filled in, the skirt, for example, when you're working on the hand, or any other area really, it does help visually for you to be able to see placement of the body parts to make sure that you're accurate with your size and placement. Hands and face and the size of the body are obviously really crucial in making them look realistic. So having that background, you can see, now you can really see the size that I've created with the shape of the hand, and that's really helpful. So I'm also going to use that to kind of trim up the inside of the wrist area here by using some blue, pulling that in, just making that a little bit thinner. So back in with the skin tone, and I'm going to kind of just touch up my shapes now. I've come a little bit too high with this line, so I want to just kind of remove it by going in with the skin tone and just making it shorter. And so there'll be a lot of back and forth. May have to come back in and thicken this up a little bit and then back in with the blue background later. It's okay to keep going back and forth. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take kind of this skin tone color, and I want to just really thin up these dark lines that I made, because right now those dark lines, they're the creases that are created by the fingers, and I've got them in there. First placement of them was really thick. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of going in between each line, which is actually the fingers, and putting in the skin tone shade to help thin up those lines. So I'm just going to thin up those lines. And then back in with the blue to really adjust the shape. So there's an angle that's created by the knuckles with the turn of the hand that needs to go in there. So just kind of shortening up the shape of the fingers in those, especially in those outer two knuckles. And then adding a little bit more length to the middle and forefinger, which are the two fingers that we actually see a little bit more shape in. So the best way to kind of do realism in general, but especially when we're working in portraits, is to do your best to focus on shapes, lights and darks, as opposed to trying to make something look like a hand. So I'm just kind of treating each individual area as a shape and looking at what size that shape is, how light or dark it is. I'm kind of just working around the body that way. And so we'll stop here for now. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Joanne Marchildon. This was Pastels with Joanne. And join us next time, and we're going to work on finishing up this portrait. And you can find me at joannemarchildon.com and check out our events at Paint and Party Nights. Thanks so much. See you next time.